My name is Safia. I was born a princess.
And on March 15, 2019, I was supposed to die one. They would call it natural causes. A sudden illness. Perhaps a heart condition no one knew about. The international press would run sympathetic headlines about a young Saudi princess tragically lost too soon. There would be a state funeral with thousands of mourners who never really knew me. And the three families would continue their alliance as if I had never existed at all. But I'm still here. And what happened in the 7 days between my death sentence and my impossible escape will challenge everything you think you know about miracles, about freedom, and about a God who sees women that the world treats as merchandise. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. I was 13 years old when I learned I wasn't a person. I was a transaction. It was late evening in our family's winter palace in Riyadh. I had been looking for my mother, wandering the marble corridors lined with artwork worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The click of my shoes echoed against floors so polished you could see your reflection. I heard voices coming from my father's private study, a room where children were never permitted.
I should have walked away.
But I heard my own name. I pressed myself against the ornate door, hand-carved from Lebanese cedar, and listened as my father spoke with two other men. Their voices were calm, businesslike, discussing oil contracts and political alliances. And then I heard it. The girl will strengthen all three bloodlines. 5 years with each family. Starting at 22, concluding at 37. The pact will be ironclad, bound by our family honor. The other men agreed. Documents were signed. I heard the scratch of expensive pens on paper, sealing my fate like a business merger. I ran back to my room, silk abaya trailing behind me, and vomited into my private bathroom's golden sink. Imported Italian marble, temperature-controlled floors, a bathtub that could fit 6 people.
I had everything a girl could want.
Except a future that belonged to me. Have you ever felt completely alone while surrounded by people? Have you ever worn jewelry worth millions while feeling utterly worthless inside? For the next 9 years, I lived in a golden cage. I was educated at the finest European boarding schools. I speak 5 languages fluently: Arabic, English, French, Italian, and Mandarin. I studied international relations at Oxford. I attended galas where I smiled for cameras alongside celebrities and world leaders. But every moment I knew. Every birthday that passed brought me closer to 22. Closer to the first transfer. Closer to becoming property passed between 3 of the most powerful families in the Middle East. The pact was simple in its cruelty. I would be married to Prince Khalid of the first family for 5 years. Then, regardless of any children, any life we'd built, I would be transferred to Prince Rashid of the second family for another 5 years. Finally, Prince Faisal of the third family would have his turn.
15 years total. 3 husbands.
One woman treated like a rotating asset in a political portfolio. Why would they do this? Because each family controlled different sectors: oil, banking, and telecommunications. Together, they could dominate the regional economy. But they didn't trust each other. This pact, with me as the living bond between them, ensured that betraying one family meant betraying their own bloodline. I was insurance.
I was collateral.
I was not human to them. My 22nd birthday arrived like an execution date. The wedding to Prince Khalid was held in a palace ballroom that held 800 guests. The ceiling was inlaid with gold leaf that caught the light from 12 crystal chandeliers, each one costing more than a luxury car. I wore a dress worth $400,000, designed exclusively for this occasion. Diamonds circled my neck, my wrists, my fingers. I couldn't breathe. The imam performing the ceremony recited the traditional Islamic marriage vows. I repeated the words in Arabic, words I had been rehearsing for weeks. I accept this marriage with the specified mahr and according to the commands of Allah and the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad. The mahr, the mandatory gift from groom to bride in Islamic marriages, was a villa in Monaco. As if real estate could compensate for ownership of a human soul. Prince Khalid lifted my veil. He was handsome, educated in London, charming when he wanted to be. But when he looked at me, I saw the same thing I saw in the eyes of the other 2 princes sitting in the front row, waiting their turn. Entitlement. I was a rare collectible they would each possess for a designated period. That night, in a bedroom suite larger than most family homes, I performed wudu, the ritual washing required before Islamic prayer. I washed my hands 3 times, rinsed my mouth, cleaned my nostrils, washed my face, my arms up to the elbows, wiped my head, and washed my feet. Every movement precise, exactly as I'd been taught since childhood. Then I laid my prayer rug facing Mecca and prostrated myself for Isha, the night prayer. But as my forehead touched the soft carpet, as my lips formed the familiar Arabic phrases, I felt absolutely nothing. The words were sounds without meaning. The rituals were movements without soul. Allah, I whispered after the formal prayer ended, if you are there, why did you make me a woman? Why did you create me just to be used?
Silence. Always silence.
The first 2 years of my marriage to Khalid were exactly what you'd expect. Public appearances where we played the perfect royal couple. Private dinners with the 3 families where I was discussed like a shared investment. I had my own wing of the palace, my own staff, unlimited spending accounts. I also had no freedom to leave the country without permission. No ability to make decisions about my own body. And a countdown clock always ticking. 3 years left, then 2, then 1, before I would be transferred to the next family like a lease expiring.
Could you imagine living like that?
Could you imagine waking up every morning knowing that your entire existence serves someone else's purpose, never your own? It was during the 2nd year that something small happened. Something that would eventually cost me everything and save everything that mattered. One of our household staff was a Filipina woman named Maria. She had worked for our family for 7 years, quiet and efficient. She cleaned my private quarters, managed my wardrobe, and never spoke unless spoken to. I barely knew her, if I'm honest. She was part of the invisible army of foreign workers who kept our palaces running while remaining unseen. One morning, I found her packing her belongings hurriedly. Her hands were shaking.
Maria, what's happening?
I asked. She looked terrified.
I must leave today, Your Highness.
Immediately.
Why?
She hesitated, then whispered. They found something in my room. Something I should not have. Before I could ask more, 2 security personnel arrived and escorted her out. I watched from my window as she was driven away, probably to the airport for immediate deportation. This happened sometimes with foreign staff who violated rules. Possession of alcohol, inappropriate relationships, or most seriously, religious materials not approved by the kingdom's strict interpretation of Islam.
Later that day, I was restless. I wandered into the staff quarters, something I rarely did. Maria's small room had already been cleaned out, prepared for the next employee. But as I ran my hand along the top of the narrow closet, my fingers touched something.
A book.
Hidden in the gap between the closet and the ceiling. I pulled it down. The cover was worn, the pages dog-eared. I opened it and my heart stopped. It was a Bible, in English, with handwritten notes in the margins. I should have reported it immediately. Possession of non-Islamic religious materials in Saudi Arabia, especially by a Muslim, could lead to serious consequences. At minimum, interrogation. At worst, charges of apostasy, abandoning the Islamic faith, which under the strictest interpretation of Sharia law could carry a death sentence. But instead, I hid it under my abaya and carried it back to my room. That night, after Khalid left for a business trip to Dubai, after the servants had retreated, after I had performed my obligatory prayers out of habit, I sat on my bed and opened the Bible. I had never read Christian scripture before. In our religious education, we learned that the Bible had been corrupted, that only the Quran contained God's true word. We were taught that Christians worship 3 gods, that they had strayed from the straight path, that their beliefs were fundamentally wrong. But I was curious, and I was desperate for anything that might fill the void inside me. I started in the book of John. I didn't understand much at first. The language was poetic, symbolic. But then I reached chapter 8, verses 10 and 11. Jesus was speaking to a woman caught in adultery, a woman the religious leaders wanted to stone to death according to their law. The word stopped me cold. "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin no more." I read it again, and again. A woman caught in the worst possible circumstance, facing death by stoning. And this Jesus simply forgave her, told her to go free, didn't use her, didn't trade her, didn't condemn her. I spent hours that night reading by the soft glow of my bedside lamp. I read about Jesus touching lepers when religious law said they were unclean. I read about him speaking with a Samaritan woman at a well, breaking multiple social taboos. I read about him defending women, elevating them, treating them as people with dignity and worth. I had never encountered a God like this. In Islam, I had learned about Allah as all-powerful, just but distant. We submitted to his will. We followed the 5 pillars, the Shahada, the declaration that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet, Salat, the 5 daily prayers, Zakat, giving to charity, Psalm, fasting during Ramadan, and Hajj, pilgrimage to Mecca. I had done all of these faithfully, but here in these pages was a God who came close, who touched, who saw women as more than property or temptation. Over the following weeks, I read whenever I could. I used translation apps on my phone to understand difficult passages. I watched Christian sermons on YouTube during flights, using headphones and deleting my browsing history immediately after. It felt dangerous and exhilarating at once. I learned about grace, a concept I had never truly understood. In Islam, salvation came through good deeds outweighing bad deeds, through perfect submission to Allah's law. But this Christian gospel spoke of salvation as a gift, freely given, not earned. It spoke of a God who loved unconditionally, who pursued broken people, who offered freedom instead of bondage. And then, 3 months into my secret reading, something happened that changed everything. I had a dream, but it wasn't like normal dreams. It was vivid, more real than waking life, seared into my memory with impossible clarity. I was standing in the palace gardens, the massive grounds filled with imported roses, fountains carved from single blocks of marble, and pathways lit with lanterns. The moon was full overhead, casting silver light across everything. And then I saw him, a man in simple white robes, walking toward me through the roses. His face was kind but carried an authority that made kings look like children. Somehow, I knew exactly who he was, though we had never met. "Sophia," he said. And when he spoke my name, it sounded like the first time anyone had ever truly seen me. "Jesus." My voice was barely a whisper. He smiled. "You have been searching, and I have been waiting for you to call my name." "I don't understand," I said, tears already streaming down my face. "Why would you care about me? I'm Muslim. I've prayed to Allah my entire life. I've followed the law. And yet your heart has been crying out to me for years," he said gently. "Sophia, you were never created to be bought and sold. You were never created to be property passed between powerful men. You were created to be my beloved daughter, free and fully known. But I'm trapped," I sobbed. "In 3 years, they'll transfer me to the next family. And then the next. I have no way out. No choice. No future that belongs to me." He stepped closer, and when he looked at me, I felt more seen, more known, more loved than in my entire 24 years of existence. "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he said. "And whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Trust me, Sophia. Even when the cost seems unbearable. Even when freedom looks impossible. Trust me." I woke up gasping, tears soaking my silk pillowcase. The dream felt more real than the lavish bedroom around me. My heart was pounding, not with fear but with something I hadn't felt in over a decade. Hope. From that night forward, everything changed. I didn't just read the Bible. I began to pray to Jesus, tentatively at first, then with increasing desperation and intimacy. I would perform my required Islamic prayers publicly, maintaining appearances, but in private, I would whisper to Jesus. "I don't know how to do this," I would pray. "I don't know what it means to follow you in a place where following you could cost me my life. But you said you see me. You said I'm your daughter. I want to believe that's true. I want to be free." Have you ever discovered a truth so powerful that you knew it would cost you everything? Have you ever found something worth dying for? I knew I was playing with fire. I knew that if anyone discovered my secret faith, the consequences would be catastrophic. But for the first time since I was 13 years old, I felt like I was becoming a real person, not just a chess piece that I began to change in small ways. I spoke up more in family gatherings, offering opinions on political matters that women were typically expected to remain silent about. I pushed back gently when Khalid made decisions about my schedule. Without consulting me, I started connecting with the foreign staff, actually learning their names, asking about their lives. People noticed. My mother-in-law commented that I seemed different, almost rebellious. My own mother warned me to be more submissive, to remember my position. Khalid seemed amused at first, then irritated, then suspicious. But I couldn't go back to being silent. Following Jesus, even in secret, was transforming me from the inside out. The third year of my first marriage arrived. 2 years left before the transfer to Prince Rashid. The three families began planning the transition, discussing which palace I would move to, what financial arrangements would shift, how the handover would be managed to maintain public appearances. They spoke about me like I was a company being acquired. And something inside me snapped. It was during a private dinner with all three families, held in our palace's formal dining hall. The table could seat 40 people, set with china so delicate each plate cost thousands of dollars. Crystal glasses for water, juice, and expensive non-alcoholic beverages sparkled under a chandelier with 250 lights. The men were discussing the transfer. Prince Rashid was expressing his expectations for my behavior during his 5 years. He wanted me to focus on producing male heirs. He wanted me to be more visible in public charity work to enhance his family's image. He wanted me to cut my hair shorter because he preferred that style. He was describing how he would use me, and everyone at the table was nodding as if this was perfectly normal. I set down my fork. The small sound echoed in the sudden silence. "No," I said quietly. My father's head snapped toward me. "Sophia, you do not speak during these discussions." "No," I repeated louder. "I will not be transferred to another family. I will not spend 15 years being passed between 3 men like a shared investment. I will not do this." The room erupted. Khalid's face turned red. The other princes looked outraged. My mother gasped. The 3 patriarchs exchanged glances that communicated everything. "She is broken. She must be fixed. This cannot be allowed." "You have no choice," my father said, his voice like ice. "This pact was sealed before you were old enough to understand. It is done. You will honor your family's commitment." And then, because the Holy Spirit was pushing me beyond wisdom or self-preservation, I said the words that sealed my fate. I am a daughter of the living God. I am not property to be traded. And there is a king whose authority is greater than this pact, greater than these families, greater than this kingdom. The silence that followed was suffocating. Prince Rashid stood slowly. "She speaks like a Christian." My cousin Noor, who had always been jealous of my position, saw her opportunity. "I have suspected for months," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "She has been different, rebellious. Perhaps someone should investigate what she has been reading." Within an hour, my private quarters were searched. They found the Bible, hidden in a custom compartment I had made inside an expensive designer handbag. They found my phone's search history, which I had forgotten to delete last time, Christian sermons, worship songs, videos of testimonies from former Muslims who had converted to Christianity. They found everything. I was taken to a secure wing of the palace I had never seen before, a place where family members who became liabilities were kept away from public view. My room was comfortable but completely isolated. No windows, one locked door, cameras monitoring every corner. The 3 families convened an emergency council. I wasn't allowed to attend, but I heard about it later. They were furious, humiliated, and terrified. Terrified that if my apostasy became public, it would destroy their carefully crafted image. Terrified that the pact, which had taken years to negotiate, would collapse. Terrified that other women in their families might get similar ideas about freedom. They decided to hold a private religious trial. A secret tribunal composed of 3 conservative imams, each one selected by one of the 3 families. Men who interpreted Sharia law in the strictest possible terms. I was brought before them on the 4th day of my imprisonment. The room was windowless, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. The 3 imams sat behind a long table, their faces stern and unyielding. The three patriarchs sat along the side wall, watching. There was no defense attorney, no opportunity to present my case. This wasn't about justice. This was about damage control. The eldest imam spoke. Safia bint Abdullah, you stand accused of apostasy, of abandoning the Islamic faith for Christianity, of blasphemy against Allah and His Prophet Muhammad. These are the most serious crimes in our faith. What do you say? I could have denied it. I could have claimed the Bible wasn't mine, that I was just curious, that I never actually believed. I could have recited the Shahada and begged for forgiveness. But when I opened my mouth, different words came out. I say that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that He died for my sins and rose from the dead, that He has set me free from every chain, including the chains this council represents, and that no matter what you do to me, that truth remains unchanged. You could have heard a pin drop. The imam's face hardened. Then, by the authority granted to us under Sharia law, and with the agreement of your family, we find you guilty of apostasy. The sentence is death. My mother screamed. Even in her submission to my father, she loved me. But my father's face remained stone. The three princes looked satisfied. The pact would be preserved. They would simply renegotiate terms without me. The eldest imam continued. However, to avoid international scandal and to protect the honor of these families, the execution will be carried out privately. You will be given a poison meal in 7 days. Your death will be reported as sudden cardiac arrest, a previously undiagnosed condition. There will be a state funeral. You will be buried with full honors. And this incident will never be spoken of again. 7 days. I had 7 days to live. They returned me to my isolated room. The walls seemed to close in. I was 25 years old. I had a master's degree from Oxford. I spoke 5 languages. I had never truly lived a single day of my own choosing. And now I never would. That first night, I broke. I sobbed until I had no tears left. I screamed into my pillow until my voice was raw. I paced the small room like a caged animal because that's exactly what I was. But then, in the darkest hour, I remembered the dream. I remembered Jesus standing in the garden, saying, "Whom the Son sets free is free indeed." I got down on my knees on that cold floor, and I prayed. Jesus, I don't know how this works. I'm brand new at this. I've only truly followed you for a few months. But you said you see me. You said I'm your daughter. They say I'm going to die in 7 days. If that's your will, then give me peace. But if there's any way, any impossible way, that you want to use my life, then I'm yours. Completely yours. Do with me what you will. Peace didn't come immediately, but something else did, a quiet assurance that I wasn't alone in that room. The next 6 days were the longest of my life. I was brought meals 3 times a day, slid through a slot in the door. I was given fresh clothes, but no human contact, no communication, just waiting to die. I spent those days praying, reading the Bible that they had, ironically, left in my room as evidence of my crime, memorizing passages that I wanted to carry into whatever came next. I thought about Maria, the Filipina maid whose Bible had started this chain of events. I wondered if she knew, wherever she was, that her hidden book had led a Saudi princess to Jesus. I wondered if she had been praying for me. I thought about my mother, who had lived her entire life in submission to men who saw her as valuable only for the sons she produced and the alliances she maintained. I thought about all the other women trapped in golden cages across my country and beyond, told that their cages were blessings, that their chains were protection, that their silence was virtue. And I prayed that somehow, some way, my death wouldn't be meaningless. That maybe God could use even this. On the 6th day, I wrote a letter. I didn't know who would ever read it, but I needed to write it anyway. I used paper and pen they had given me, assuming I might want to write final messages to my family. Instead, I wrote this. To whoever finds this, my name is Safia. I was a princess, but that was never my true identity. I am a daughter of Jesus Christ, and that is the only title that ever mattered. They are killing me for this faith, but they cannot kill what Jesus has placed in my heart. If you are a woman reading this, know that you are seen. You are valued. You are loved by a God who doesn't trade you or use you or diminish you. You are worth the life of God's own Son. Don't settle for cages, even golden ones. Jesus offers freedom. Real freedom. Whatever it costs, it's worth it. I slid the letter under my mattress, knowing they would find it when they cleaned out my room, hoping against hope that someone might read it and wonder. The seventh day arrived. I woke before dawn, my heart pounding. This was the day. Tonight's meal would be my last. By morning, I would either be with Jesus or I would be dying alone in this room. I performed wudu one final time, not out of obligation but out of respect for the ritual that had structured my life. Then I prayed to Jesus, the prayer of someone who has nothing left to lose. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Do with me as you will. I trust you. The day passed in agonizing slowness. Breakfast came. Lunch came. Both ordinary, not poisoned yet. The final meal would be dinner, I assumed. As afternoon faded into evening, I sat on my bed and waited. The dinner slot opened at exactly 7 p.m. A tray slid through. Grilled chicken, rice with saffron, roasted vegetables, and a small dessert. Water in a crystal glass. One of these items contained poison. I didn't know which. I stared at the food. My hands were shaking. This was it. Jesus, I whispered. If this is the end, thank you for the time I had knowing you were real. Thank you for showing me what it means to be truly seen. I'm ready. I reached for the water glass. And then everything changed. At exactly 3:47 a.m., I woke from sleep I didn't remember falling into. The dinner tray sat untouched on the floor. I had fallen asleep before eating anything, which seemed impossible given my adrenaline. But that wasn't what woke me. The room was filled with light. Not harsh fluorescent light. Not lamplight. Something else entirely. Something that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Bright as the Saudi sun at noon, but somehow not painful to look at. And I heard a voice. Clear as if someone stood beside me, though I was completely alone. Sophia.
Rise.
I am opening the door. My heart nearly exploded. I stood on shaking legs and walked to the door that had been electronically locked for 7 days. The door that required a 12-digit security code. The door that I had seen guards open only with palm scanners and iris recognition. I reached out and touched the handle. It turned smoothly in my hand. The door swung open silently. I stood frozen in shock. This was impossible. Completely, utterly impossible. Walk, the voice said gently. I am with you. I stepped into the hallway, still wearing the simple dress they had given me. No shoes, no bag, nothing but myself. The corridor stretched before me, lined with doors to other secured rooms. Security cameras dotted the ceiling every 15 feet. But as I walked, I noticed something bizarre. The small red recording lights on the cameras were flickering, then went dark. And when I glanced at the monitoring screen visible through an open office door, I saw footage that wasn't current. The screens showed yesterday's empty hallway. They were looping old footage. Someone or something had taken control of the security system. I reached the first checkpoint. Normally, 2 guards stood here 24 hours a day. As I approached, I saw them both slumped in their chairs, heads back, mouths slightly open. Asleep. I walked right past them. Neither one stirred. The next corridor. The next checkpoint. Every single guard was in a deep, unnatural sleep. I could see their chests rising and falling with steady breathing. They weren't unconscious. They were simply sleeping so deeply that nothing could wake them. Have you ever witnessed something so impossible that your brain couldn't fully process it? Have you ever stood in the middle of a miracle and thought, this cannot be real, even as you lived it? I walked through 5 security checkpoints, past 17 guards, all sleeping, through 3 electronically locked doors that opened at my touch, down corridors I had never seen before, yet somehow knowing exactly which turns to take. It was as if someone was guiding my steps. I finally reached the palace's Eastern Service entrance, a door used by cleaning staff to access the massive gardens. Beyond it lay 300 acres of grounds, and beyond that, walls and gates. Impossible to escape. Impossible to cross without being seen. I pushed open the door and stepped into the pre-dawn darkness. The garden stretched before me, silent and empty. I started walking, heading toward what I thought was the eastern perimeter, where the walls were lowest. And then I saw headlights. A car, parked near the service road. Engine running. A figure standing beside it. Every instinct screamed danger. This was a trap. They were waiting for me. But that voice, so clear and gentle, spoke again. Trust me. I walked toward the car, my bare feet cold on the paved pathway. As I got closer, the figure stepped into the faint light from the vehicle's interior. My breath caught. It was Maria, the Filipina maid who had been deported 2 years ago. The woman whose Bible had started everything. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. Princess Sophia, she whispered. I had a dream 3 nights ago. Jesus told me to come to this exact spot, at this exact time. He said I would find you here. He said I would help you escape. I didn't believe it. How could I get back into Saudi Arabia? How could I access palace grounds? But I got on a plane anyway. I drove here. I prayed. And here you are. I started crying. Maria, they were going to kill me. They sentenced me to death for apostasy. Tonight was supposed to be my last night. She grabbed my hand. Then we must go. Now. We got into the car and she drove toward the service gate, the one used by delivery trucks and maintenance vehicles. I expected alarms. Armed guards. Lockdown. Instead, the gate stood open. The guard booth was empty. We drove through. Maria navigated through pre-dawn Riyadh like she knew exactly where to go, though she later told me she had never driven these streets before. Every turn felt guided. Every traffic light turned green as we approached. We drove for 6 hours, heading toward the Jordanian border. We joined a humanitarian convoy that was crossing legally, carrying medical supplies to refugee camps. Maria had somehow arranged papers for me, identifying me as a Filipino aid worker. The Saudi border guard glanced at my passport photo, then at my face. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I would faint. If he looked closely, if he ran my information, if he recognized me. He stamped the passport and waved us through. We crossed into Jordan. And for the first time in my life, I was outside Saudi Arabia, without handlers, without guards, without anyone controlling my movements. I was free. Maria drove us to a safe house run by an underground network of Christians who help refugees and those fleeing religious persecution. They gave me clothes, food, and most importantly, safety. Over the next 3 months, with the help of international religious freedom organizations and immigration lawyers, I applied for asylum in a Western country. My case was granted based on documented religious persecution. I cannot tell you which country I live in now. I cannot show you my face. I cannot use my real name publicly. The 3 families are powerful, with connections that reach across continents. Even now, there is a price on my head in certain circles. But I am alive. And I am free. Today, I run an underground ministry called The Hidden Path. We help women trapped in impossible situations across the Gulf region find freedom, both spiritual and physical. We connect them with safe networks, with legal resources, with counselors and therapists who understand religious trauma. In the past 4 years, we have helped over 200 women escape situations ranging from forced marriages to honor violence to religious persecution. Some are converts to Christianity, like me. Others simply couldn't survive the abuse any longer. Every woman who reaches out to us hears the same message I first discovered in Maria's hidden Bible. You are seen. You are valued. You are loved by a God who doesn't trade you or use you. You were created to be free. The 3 families reported my death as planned. There was indeed a state funeral. My mother was told I had died of sudden cardiac arrest. To the world, Princess Sophia no longer exists. But to the kingdom of God, I have never been more alive. Let me ask you something. You've watched this entire story. Maybe you're sitting comfortably in your home, in a country where religious freedom is guaranteed. Maybe you can't imagine being trapped the way I was. But here's what I've learned. We all have our cages. Some are made of gold and some of iron, but they're still cages. Maybe your cage is family expectations that suffocate your true self. Maybe it's a relationship where you're treated as property, not a partner. Maybe it's addiction that promises freedom but delivers chains. Maybe it's shame over past mistakes that keeps you imprisoned in self-hatred. Maybe it's fear of what others will think if you follow the truth your heart is whispering. Whatever your cage looks like, I need you to hear this. Jesus specializes in impossible escapes. He opened an electronically sealed door that required 12-digit codes. He put 17 armed guards into supernatural sleep. He orchestrated a rescue involving a woman who had been deported 2 years earlier. He guided me through a border crossing that should have ended in my immediate arrest and execution. If he can do that, what cage of yours is too strong for him to break? The question is never whether God can set you free. The question is whether you're willing to trust him when the cost looks unbearable, when the path looks impossible, when everyone around you says you're crazy for even considering it. I was born a princess. I was raised in palaces worth billions. I was promised to 3 of the most powerful families in the Middle East. But none of that compared to the moment I knelt on a cold floor and called Jesus my king. That was the moment I stopped being property and became a daughter. That was the moment I stopped being a transaction and became a person. That was the moment I stopped surviving and started truly living. If you're watching this and you feel trapped, if you feel like your life will never be your own, if you feel like you're just a pawn in someone else's game, I want you to know something. Jesus sees you.
Right now.
Right where you are. In your golden cage, or your iron cell. In your big city apartment or your small town house. In your visible prison, or your invisible one.
He sees you.
And he's already planning your impossible escape. All you have to do is call his name. My name is Sophia. I am 29 years old. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. And I am finally, truly, impossibly free. Will you let him set you free too?